Hello, I'm Kendall Qualls, and this is Fully Charged. On this podcast, we counter the progressive narrative and give you a perspective you'll never hear conveyed in the public arena. Thanks for joining us. Our work here in the Twin Cities is paying dividends, with more people from the Black community joining our cause, calling for a return to the basics of faith, family, and education, and developing a sense of responsibility and accountability that is so desperately needed. Now, in addition to the work we're doing here, we are getting attention nationally. We've been published in the New York Post, the Federalist. We've been aired on the Dennis Prager Show, and even locally with our own fans here in Minnesota on Garage Logic with Joe Soucheray. And today, you'll hear from our guests. They're come from Cleveland, Ohio, as well as Denver, Colorado, and they want to be a part of our movement nationally to push back against critical race theory and this false narrative of systemic racism. So let's jump in. First of all, knowing the work you do, how did you find out about Take Charge and what we're doing here in Minnesota?
Being a fan of Prager, I watch all the 5-minute videos, and Kendall, I saw you on your video about how to take back the country. And I said, boy, this guy's speaking my language. And, you had talked about Judeo-Christian values and taking control of our education system and marriage is cool and smart and eliminating cancel culture. And I don't know if I speak for Sandy, but I particularly was interested in the taking children's education back as I'm a teacher. And the Take Charge Minnesota values were so in lockstep with the way I thought. And it's always refreshing to hear people that think the way that you do. And after Sandy and I had talked, I definitely wanted to tell her about this video that I had seen because the Take Charge people are the kind of people that I think our organization would like to be connected with in any way possible. So it was all a PragerU video and a connection of common values, I'd say.
Okay,
Right.
Great. Sandy?
And I might add that I've worked with many nonprofits. And in fact, almost 4 years ago, we were working with an after-school group of young people, mostly minority children. And we were trying to get them to come up a little bit in their grades. And then we were expressing a lot of things about value and responsibility and all of that. And it really breaks my heart, Kendall, because, the things you talk about, I witnessed, I saw. And really, 4 years later, these boys that were in middle school are now fathers. And it breaks my heart that when you all talk about first finishing school, get a job, get married, and then have children, that is not the order in which they actually have been running their lives. Yeah. So they're already a little bit behind with the choices that they've made. So when Bill told me about you, and I looked down your site, and I was just so impressed with what you all are doing. I felt that we had to somehow get a touch with you and see what might come of this.
Well, that's great. And first of all, thank you so much for those kind words about what we're doing. And for both of you, you talk about shared values. These used to be common, everyday American values.
Right.
These weren't politically left or right.
No.
These were consistent common values. And I believe that there are more of us as Americans that are aligned to these type of values than there are that differ. Unfortunately, our fractured media and how things are structured now politically doesn't align and doesn't enable us to get connected. So tell us about your organization now. Tell us about what you're doing. I think people would find it interesting. It's I wish you had gotten more support in what you're doing, but please share it with the audience, and then we'll go from there.
Well, August 2015, after Ferguson and Baltimore and all the different things that were happening, I wrote to 14 black leaders asking for how do we stop this generational poverty. I have been right out of college. I was in Watts in Los Angeles teaching. So I was well aware of what was happening. But the sad thing was, it seemed to me that we hadn't progressed that much. We still had these incredible pockets of inner city schools and poverty. And it made me really wonder why we are in the same place that I found myself 50 years ago. So I wrote, as I said, to these 14 black leaders, and only one responded, and that was Frances Presley Rice. She asked me to write about civil rights. Well, I thought, gosh, there's a lot more to this black history than just civil rights. How did we get there? What happened during all that time? So I started at 1619, which really, frankly, is not the beginning, but it was the beginning for what the book that I decided to start writing. And it took me 2 years to write it, and I found incredible information in there. And then I started to see the sort of the game plan of how some ideology wants to keep people in poverty by having the government be the father in the family. And then, of course, with my nonprofit work and with other organizations, it was clear that the children did not have a father at home. One of our kids that I work with, who is now a father himself at 18, he has 5 siblings, well, 4 plus himself, and every one of those siblings, Kendall, had a different father.
Yeah.
And that is just not a workable situation for a family. So I felt like I had to do something. And that's how the book started. However, right now what's happening is I've got about 21,000 plus followers in Facebook, and most of them are black. And we've been featuring positive, wonderful stories about people who made a difference in this country. And invariably, the response I get from these folks is, why didn't we know this, number one? Can you put this in some kind of book form? And so we are right now working on a book called The Chronicle of Heroes. It's nonpartisan. It's just about uplifting stories, and the response to this have been really remarkable.
When you said you got out of school 50 years ago,
yes,
that problem was a civil rights problem.
Yes.
And unfortunately, what the progressives, what the elites want to do is try to make people think that the problem that we're facing today is still a civil rights problem.
Right.
And it's not.
It's exactly right.
Totally different. This is not a civil rights 2.0, what we're dealing with.
Right.
This is a deliberate effort to keep people dependent on government.
Correct.
Not promote the traditional 2-parent values, Judeo-Christian values, which were really the core values of the black community before we had help from the government.
Correct.
Well, to that point, my wife, Sheila, she did a 5-part series on education here in our state. It was called Trapped: Chaos in the Classroom.
Right.
And one of the things she uncovered was, there's almost over 25 years, a deliberate method or a deliberate stance on teaching virtually all the sins of America.
Exactly.
And not teaching any of its virtues.
Right.
And so what has happened is you've had now 10, 20 years of kids graduating from high school, graduating from college, that don't have the sense of patriotism our generation had. They're not proud of their country as previous generations.
Correct.
Not because they're not smart students or smart kids, it's because they haven't been taught,
right,
deliberately taught its virtues. Tell us a little bit about your organization and where the audience could actually find out more about the work you're doing.
Well, you can go to our website, which is yocumblackhistory.org, and on there are lots of lesson plans, and that's really the focus of the website, is to promote and give free lessons to everyone.
So we have a lot of students that think they know their history, and they've been trained at almost arrogance in a way.
Right, right.
Especially when speaking to people older than them, with little or no respect about what the truth is about.
And it's so hard, Kendall, because if the student wants to learn more, they don't have the opportunities to really do that. I mean, they'd have to go and do some research on their own. They're not getting it in the classroom, at least from my experience, what I know. It's not in the classroom. So, and, you know, a lot of children are not interested in doing extra work outside of class. So what we're trying to do is maybe involve the parent and have the student be along with them to actually be able to share this, because really it's for the children and the parents that we are doing this. And I think they find it interesting, and at least it starts some dialogue, because dialogue is what we need. Bill does an excellent job with his own children and with teaching to get kids to think outside the box.
Yeah, one thing I tell my students is to be open-minded, but be skeptical.
Right.
And if they hear something, or if I say something that sounds funny or odd to them, I've trained them to say, so where did you get that information? Or what do you mean by that? In other words, hold people accountable to their statements. And another thing that I would tell both my students and parents is stop listening to the news, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
The news is the worst place to get the news.
Right.
And so get lots of sources, use your critical thinking skills. Does this sound right? Does it not sound right?
Yeah. On one of your videos, and I can't remember who the lady is, but gosh, she's just wonderful. She said, history is about the future. And I thought, wow, that is such a great statement. Because if you don't know your history, you really don't know where you're going.
Exactly. Well, I appreciate you both for joining us. Thank you so much. Okay, thanks for watching us here on Fully Charged. We created this podcast to counter the progressive narrative and to give you the other side of the story that you rarely ever hear. If you like this podcast and believe in what we're doing, please consider subscribing and giving us a 5-star rating. Most importantly, share our podcast with family and friends. To find out more about our work, go to our website at takechargemn.com and please consider supporting us. Your support helps us spread the message broadly. We'll be back soon with more of the perspective you never hear.